Sign the papers, Sofia! Do it now!
The Mafia boss hid his fat wife because he was ashamed of her. Years later, he regretted it. 2 words. That's all Camilla Moretti offered when Sofia asked what she'd done to deserve divorce papers and a wire transfer waiting on the desk in front of her. You existed. Sofia sat frozen in the private study. Rain hammering the windows outside. 3 years of marriage collapsing into a single devastating sentence delivered by a woman who had never once doubted her own righteousness. What nobody in that room knew yet, not Camilla standing over her with the papers, not Dominic arriving too late to say a single word in his wife's defense, was the secret Sofia had been carrying for 6 days. She was 9 weeks pregnant, and she'd planned to tell him tonight. Subscribe right now and drop your city in the comments, because what happens after Sofia walks out that door is going to leave you speechless. Like, share, notifications on. You are not ready for this story. Sign the papers, Sofia. Camilla's voice carried the same cold authority she'd used running the Moretti family's public image for 4 decades. I'm not signing anything. You don't get to say no in this house. Take the money, sign the divorce papers, and disappear from my son's life before sunrise. Sofia's hands trembled against the leather folder on the desk. What have I done to deserve this? You existed. The words landed like a physical blow. A faithful wife? Camilla's laugh carried no warmth at all. You call hiding inside this mansion for 3 years a marriage? Adrian promised me things would change. Sofia's voice barely held steady. My son made a lot of promises. Camilla leaned forward, her expression carrying the specific cruelty of someone certain she was doing the right thing. But tonight, I'll show you the truth. She pulled out her phone, playing a recent interview clip. The country's most eligible bachelor, deflecting a journalist's question about marriage with practiced ease, never once mentioning a wife existed at all. No, Sofia's breath caught. This can't be. He wasn't protecting me. Camilla's smile carried genuine satisfaction. He was protecting his reputation. He loves me. My son may love your heart. Camilla's voice dropped, delivering the specific devastation she'd been building toward for 3 years. But every time he looks at your body, he remembers why he keeps you hidden. You're lying. My son is ashamed of his fat wife. The door opened. Dominic Moretti stepped into the study, catching only the tail end of a conversation that had already detonated everything. Mother, what is all this? I've solved your biggest mistake. Camilla's tone carried no hesitation at all. Adrian, tell me she's lying. Sofia's voice cracked, desperate. Please, look at me. You've always told me to trust you, so look me in the eyes and tell me none of this is true. Silence stretched between them. The specific paralysis of a man whose entire identity depended on control, finding himself completely unable to control the one moment that actually mattered. I never wanted things to happen this way. Dominic's voice came out quieter than either of them expected. But maybe this is what's best. The words landed with the finality of a door closing. 3 years earlier, Sofia had walked into this marriage with clear eyes. Her father controlled the East Coast's most valuable shipping routes, and the union between his daughter and the Moretti organization's heir sealed an alliance that made both families untouchable. Neither of them had wanted the arrangement initially, a business transaction disguised as romance. 2 people expected to perform a partnership neither had chosen. What Sofia hadn't expected was to genuinely fall for the man underneath Dominic's controlled violence. 3 years of shared meals in the compound's private dining room. Quiet nights when he'd talk about the weight of running an empire built on fear. Moments of tenderness he never once extended beyond these walls. She'd told herself the isolation was temporary, that eventually he'd be ready to stand beside her the way he claimed to want to. He never had. No public appearances, no photographs, a wardrobe that never left the estate grounds. Camilla's contempt calcifying steadily into something that had been building toward exactly this moment since the wedding day. And now, standing in the study with divorce papers in front of her, Sofia understood with devastating clarity that 3 years of waiting had earned her nothing but this. What's best? Her voice barely carried across the room. What is this? I'm pregnant. The words dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. You're pregnant. Camilla's composure cracked for the first time. Sofia's hand found her stomach instinctively, protective, the specific vulnerability of a secret she'd carried alone for 6 days, finally spoken aloud in the worst possible room, at the worst possible moment. I imagined tonight we would finally become a real family. Camilla recovered fast, her voice sharpening with immediate, calculated fury. No, if she has that baby, your career is finished, mother. You know exactly what happens. Camilla's voice carried none of her earlier restraint. They'll ask why you hid her. They'll call you a fraud. They'll destroy your reputation. They'll destroy this family. So choose. Your future, or her. I never wanted things to happen this way. Dominic's voice repeated the exact same devastating phrase. Hollow now. Final. But maybe this is what's best. The company is about to complete the biggest merger in its history. This conversation is over. Without another word, Sofia walked toward the front door. Rain poured heavily outside, the storm showing no mercy against the massive windows of the compound. Dominic finally looked up. Sofia, she stopped. For one impossible second, he thought she might turn around. Instead, she spoke without facing him. I hope one day you meet a woman you're proud to stand beside. She stepped into the storm. The massive iron gates slowly closed behind her. Dominic stood frozen. The tiny white box containing baby shoes was still sitting on the dining table, exactly where he'd left it that morning after ordering them online, planning to surprise her once she told him the news he now understood he'd already known was coming. Something inside him screamed to run after her. He didn't move. The rain showed no mercy. Sofia hugged her coat tightly around herself as she walked down the empty road, dragging her small suitcase through puddles. Every step felt heavier than the last, but it wasn't because of the rain. It was because of the tiny life growing inside her. She rested a hand over her stomach. I'm sorry, she whispered through tears. I couldn't give you the family I dreamed of. A car sped past, splashing muddy water onto her dress. She didn't react. Nothing could hurt more than what she had already endured that night. Then, screech. A deafening sound cut through the storm. A black luxury SUV lost control around the bend, smashed through a guardrail, and flipped onto its side before crashing into a large tree. The impact shook the ground. For a moment, everything became still. Then smoke began pouring from the engine. Drivers slowed down. Some stepped out. Instead of helping, several people pulled out their phones. Oh my God, someone call an ambulance. I'm recording this. Sofia looked around in disbelief. Why is nobody helping? One man shrugged. The car could explode. Another woman shook her head. It's too dangerous. Sofia looked toward the wreckage. A weak voice cried from inside. Help! Without thinking twice, she dropped her suitcase and ran. Ma'am! Someone shouted. Don't go over there! She ignored them. The driver's door was crushed shut. She ran to the passenger side and pulled with all her strength. It wouldn't move. She looked through the shattered window. An elegant elderly woman was trapped inside, blood running down her forehead. Their eyes met. Please, the woman whispered. Sofia grabbed a large rock and smashed the remaining glass. She reached inside carefully. It's okay, she said softly. I'm here. The woman winced in pain. My leg. Sofia looked down. The woman's leg was pinned beneath twisted metal. Smoke grew thicker. Flames flickered beneath the hood. Sofia's heartbeat pounded in her ears. She braced herself and pushed against the damaged frame with everything she had. Nothing happened. Again. Still nothing. Come on, she gasped. With one final desperate effort, the metal shifted just enough. The woman's leg came free. "I've got you." Sofia wrapped one arm around her and slowly pulled her from the vehicle. The moment they reached a safe distance, boom, the SUV burst into flames. Heat washed over them. People screamed. An ambulance siren echoed in the distance. The elderly woman reached for Sofia's hand. "You," she struggled to breathe. "You saved me." Sofia smiled weakly. "I'm just glad you're alive." Everything went black. When Sofia opened her eyes again, she found herself in a hospital bed. A nurse noticed immediately. "You're awake." Sofia's voice came out rough. "What happened?" "You fainted from exhaustion." The nurse's smile carried genuine warmth. "And congratulations. You and your baby are fine." Relief flooded Sofia's face. She instinctively placed both hands over her stomach. Thank God. Just then, there was a gentle knock. An older gentleman entered the room wearing a tailored suit. Behind him stood 2 security officers. He bowed politely. "Mrs. Bianchi." Sofia nodded cautiously. "My name is Samuel Rhodes. I serve as personal advisor to Mrs. Eleanor Castellano." Sofia frowned. "I'm sorry. I don't know her." "You do." Samuel smiled gently. "She's the woman whose life you saved." Sofia looked surprised. "Is she all right?" "She insisted on seeing you." A few minutes later, Samuel wheeled an elderly woman into the room. She looked far stronger than before despite the bandage on her forehead. Her eyes were kind. "So," she smiled warmly, "you're the brave young lady who ignored everyone else." Sofia stood respectfully. "You shouldn't be standing." Eleanor laughed. "I've survived boardrooms for 40 years. I can survive a bruised leg." Both women smiled for the first time that night. Eleanor studied Sofia carefully. There was something unusual about her. No designer clothes, no expensive jewelry, no makeup. Yet despite swollen eyes from crying, she carried herself with quiet grace. "You never asked who I was." Sofia shook her head. "It didn't matter. And you never asked for money." "I didn't help you for money." Eleanor tilted her head. "Then why?" Sofia answered without hesitation. "Because if my mother had been trapped in that car," she paused, "I would have prayed someone helped her." Silence filled the room. Samuel glanced at Eleanor. He had worked beside her for nearly 30 years. Very few people ever spoke to her without expecting something in return. Eleanor finally smiled. "What do you do for a living?" Sofia hesitated. She forced a smile. "I used to help my husband." "You used to? We divorced tonight." The room became quiet again. Eleanor noticed the suitcase beside the hospital bed. "Just one suitcase, nothing else. You have somewhere to stay." Sofia lowered her eyes. "I'll figure something out." Samuel looked uncomfortable. "Eleanor," she raised a hand, stopping him. Then she looked back at Sofia. "And the baby's father." Sofia swallowed. "He made his choice. I'll make mine." Eleanor nodded slowly. "I see." After another moment, she spoke. "I built one of the largest companies in this country. I've negotiated billion-dollar contracts. I've met presidents. I've met royalty. But do you know what I've learned?" Sofia shook her head. "The rarest people in the world," she smiled, "are genuinely kind." Tears formed again in Sofia's eyes. She wasn't used to kindness. Not anymore. Eleanor reached into her handbag and removed a business card. "I have a proposal." Sofia looked confused. "I don't want to insult you by offering charity, so I won't." She placed the card on the bedside table. "I'd like to offer you a position." Sofia blinked. "A job?" "A fresh start," Samuel added with a smile. "Mrs. Castellano never offers second chances, only first-class opportunities." Sofia looked overwhelmed. "But you barely know me," Eleanor chuckled. "I know enough. I know you risked your life for a complete stranger. I know you refused to take money from someone who hurt you. And I know your child deserves a mother who isn't worrying about where she'll sleep." Sofia couldn't hold back anymore. She covered her face and cried. Not from heartbreak this time. From relief. Eleanor reached over and gently squeezed her hand. You've spent too long being treated as though your worth depended on how you looked. She smiled. From today onward, it will depend on what you can become. Sofia looked up. Hope, something she thought she'd lost forever, began quietly returning. She nodded. I'll work hard, I promise. Eleanor smiled. I wasn't looking for perfection. I was looking for courage, and I think I found it in the middle of a rainstorm. Across the city, that same night unfolded very differently inside the Moretti compound. Dominic hadn't moved from the study for nearly an hour after the gates closed behind Sofia. The tiny white box of baby shoes still sitting untouched on the dining table where he'd left it that morning. When he finally moved, it wasn't slow, it was frantic. He called every number he had. Her phone went straight to voicemail. He sent security to every location he could think of. Her father's estate, the hotel where they'd honeymooned, the small bakery she used to visit before Camilla insisted the outings stopped drawing unwanted attention. Nothing. Where is she? His voice carried none of the controlled authority his organization was accustomed to. Find her. Now. Camilla stood in the doorway, her earlier certainty visibly cracking as the hours stretched on without a single trace of Sofia turning up anywhere. She'll come back. She has nowhere else to go. Dominic's eyes carried something Camilla had never seen from her son in 37 years. You don't understand. She's pregnant, Mother. She was going to tell me tonight, and instead, his voice broke completely. Instead, I let you do this. Camilla's composure faltered for the first time since the confrontation began. Pregnant. The word landed differently now, stripped of the calculated fury she'd delivered it with in front of Sofia, replaced by something closer to horror as she began to understand the actual scope of what her ultimatum had cost. Raphael, Dominic's younger brother, stood quietly near the study's entrance, having arrived too late to intervene, but early enough to witness the aftermath unfolding in real time. I should have said something. His voice carried genuine guilt. I noticed how she was living for 3 years. I saw how isolated she'd become. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. Dominic's organization's considerable resources, surveillance networks, informants across the city, financial reach that could locate almost anyone within hours, turned up absolutely nothing. Sofia Bianchi had simply vanished. Days passed, then weeks. Dominic's search continued with the specific, desperate intensity of a man finally understanding, far too late, exactly what silence had cost him. But every lead ran cold. Every informant came back empty-handed, and the woman who had spent 3 years hidden inside his compound had somehow, impossibly, disappeared completely from a world he controlled almost entirely. What Dominic didn't know, what none of his considerable resources ever managed to uncover, was that Sofia hadn't vanished at all. She had simply stepped into a world his organization had no reach into whatsoever, protected by a woman whose legitimate business empire operated on principles entirely foreign to the Moretti family's methods of control. 7 years passed. Under Eleanor Castellano's guidance, Sofia transformed completely. She studied business during the day, read financial reports late into the night, attended leadership meetings with a notebook in her lap, writing down every lesson Eleanor offered. She built a premium bakery that quickly expanded into a successful chain of luxury cafes. Then she invested. 1 company became 3, 3 became 10. People admired her intelligence, her humility, her determination. She never pretended to be someone else. She remained proudly plus-size, smiling in every magazine interview, answering the same way whenever a reporter asked about beauty standards. My body never stopped me from succeeding. Other people's opinions almost did. Beside her, little Noah grew into a bright, cheerful 7-year-old who loved baking cookies with his mother and adored Eleanor, whom he proudly called Grandma Ellie. Meanwhile, across the city, the empire Sofia had walked away from began its own slow, inevitable collapse. Poor investments, declining profits, investors pulling out one by one. Dominic's confidence, once absolute, had begun quietly eroding under the weight of a company, sliding toward crisis he'd never once anticipated, the night he let his silence cost him everything. One afternoon, Eleanor stood in her office overlooking the city skyline. Samuel entered quietly. "The acquisition has been approved." Eleanor smiled. "So, it's official." Samuel nodded. "Moretti Holdings now belongs to Castellano Consolidated." Eleanor turned toward Sofia, who had entered the office moments earlier, navy suit tailored perfectly, 7 years of transformation carrying itself in every step she took. "It's time." Across the city, panic spread through Moretti Holdings. Employees whispered in hallways. Board members rushed between offices. No one knew why an emergency meeting had been called on such short notice. The specific urgency of the summons, carrying none of the usual bureaucratic warning that typically preceded major corporate announcements. Inside the boardroom, Dominic adjusted his tie nervously. His company had struggled for years. Poor investments, declining profits, investors pulling out one after another, until even his own confidence had begun to erode, under the weight of watching an empire he'd once controlled absolutely slip through his fingers piece by piece. Camilla sat beside him, her earlier composure from 7 years ago, now replaced by the specific brittle anxiety of a woman watching everything she'd once believed she was protecting collapse regardless. "They're sending a representative," Dominic sighed. "As long as they don't replace management." The conference room doors slowly opened. Every conversation stopped. High heels echoed against the polished floor. 1, 2, 3. Then she appeared. Sofia. She wore a beautifully tailored navy blue suit. Her confidence filled the room before she spoke a single word. She hadn't become smaller. She had become stronger. The room fell completely silent. Dominic's eyes widened. "Sofia." She acknowledged everyone with a polite nod. "Good morning." Camilla's face turned pale. "No, it can't be." Sofia calmly took the seat at the head of the table, the seat that once belonged to Dominic. She placed a folder in front of her. "My name is Sofia Bianchi." A slight smile crossed her face. "Chairwoman of Castellano Consolidated." No one moved. No one spoke. Dominic could barely breathe. She looked directly at him. "It's been a long time." He stood slowly. I don't understand." "You will." She pressed a button on the remote. Financial reports appeared on the large screen. For the next 20 minutes, Sofia presented detailed evidence. Poor decisions, failed acquisitions, unnecessary spending, declining investor confidence. Every chart pointed to one conclusion. Moretti Holdings had been sinking for years. She never raised her voice, never insulted anyone. She simply presented facts, the specific devastating precision of a woman who had spent 7 years learning exactly how to dismantle an empire without ever once needing to raise her voice to do it. When she finished, she closed the folder. "As majority shareholder, I've approved a complete restructuring." The board members nodded, one by one. The vote was unanimous. Sofia looked at Dominic. "Effective immediately." She paused. "You are relieved of your duties as chief executive officer." Silence. Dominic stared at her, not with anger, with disbelief. "I built this company," Sofia answered calmly. "And now someone else has to save it." Just then, the boardroom door opened again. A cheerful little voice echoed through the room. "Mom?" Noah ran straight toward Sofia. She smiled warmly and knelt to hug him. "Hey, sweetheart. I finished school early. I'm proud of you." Noah wrapped his little arms around her neck. "I missed you." Dominic couldn't stop staring. The little boy had his eyes, his smile, even the tiny dimple on his left cheek. His entire world seemed to stop. He whispered, "How old is he?" Sofia stood. 7. Dominic staggered backward. 7. Exactly 7 years. His eyes filled with tears. His voice trembled. "He's mine, isn't he?" Sofia didn't answer immediately. She simply rested her hand on Noah's shoulder. Finally, she nodded once. Yes. The room felt unbearably quiet. Camilla slowly sat back in her chair. Her hands began shaking. "My grandson," she whispered. "Oh God." Noah looked around innocently. "Mum." Sofia smiled softly. "It's all right." She looked back at Dominic. "You gave up the chance to know him the night you chose silence." Without another word, she took Noah's hand and walked out of the boardroom. Dominic couldn't move. For the first time in his life, money couldn't solve his problem. A week later, there was a quiet knock on Sofia's office door. "Come in." Camilla entered alone. No designer handbag, no expensive jewelry, no arrogance. She looked older, smaller somehow. "I came to apologize." Sofia remained silent. Camilla lowered her head. "I spent years believing appearance was everything. My pride cost my son his family, and it cost me 7 years with my grandson." Tears rolled down her face. "I was wrong." Sofia spoke gently. "I waited a long time to hear those words." Camilla nodded. "I know." She quietly walked away, not asking for forgiveness, simply accepting responsibility. A few days later, Dominic asked Sofia to meet him at the small park where Noah loved feeding ducks. He stood waiting with nervous hands. When Sofia arrived, Noah ran toward the playground, giving them a little privacy. Dominic looked exhausted. "I've rehearsed this conversation 100 times." Sofia folded her arms. "And I was ashamed," he finally admitted. "Not because of you." He shook his head. "Because I cared too much about what everyone else thought. I convinced myself I was protecting my business. But the truth," his voice broke, "I was protecting my ego." Sofia looked at him quietly. He wiped away a tear. "When you left, I should have followed you. When you told me about our baby, I should have stood beside you. When my mother insulted you, I should have defended you. I failed you, and I failed our son." Sofia's eyes became emotional, but her voice stayed steady. "You didn't lose me because I was overweight." She took one slow step closer. "You lost me because every single time you had to choose between me and public opinion, you chose public opinion." Dominic lowered his head. "I know." He looked toward Noah, who was laughing happily on the swings. "Do you think I could ever earn the chance to be his father?" Sofia watched Noah for a long moment. Then she answered honestly. "Being his biological father happened 7 years ago." She looked back at Dominic. "Becoming his dad starts today." Hope flickered in his eyes. "But understand this. If you disappear again, you won't lose me. You'll lose him." Dominic nodded immediately. "I won't. I swear." Months passed. Dominic kept every promise. He attended Noah's school events. He learned how to bake cookies. He helped with homework. Slowly, he became part of Noah's life. But Sofia never returned as his wife. Some wounds heal. Some lessons remain. 1 year had passed since the boardroom. Sofia's cafe empire had expanded into 3 additional cities. Castellano Consolidated's newest quarterly report showed numbers that made even the most cautious investors take notice. And Sofia herself had become the specific kind of public figure business magazines loved to profile. Not for scandal, but for the rare, genuine story of a woman who built something real out of the worst night of her life. The National Business Excellence Awards filled the grand ballroom with the city's most powerful names. Sofia sat near the front, Noah beside her in a small suit he'd insisted on picking out himself, Eleanor on her other side, watching the ceremony unfold with the specific, quiet pride of a woman who had recognized courage in a hospital room 7 years earlier and never once doubted where it would lead. Samuel leaned toward Eleanor at one point during the earlier presentations, his voice low. "She's come a long way from that hospital bed." Eleanor's smile carried genuine warmth. She was always this. She just needed someone to see it. When the announcer called Sofia's name for Entrepreneur of the Year, the room rose to its feet in applause before she'd even reached the stage. Sofia walked up with the same steady grace that had carried her through every difficult moment since that stormy night, accepting an ultimatum that should have broken her, running toward a burning car everyone else was filming, building an empire from a single suitcase and a secret she'd been too afraid to speak out loud. She stood at the podium, the applause slowly settling into an expectant hush. 7 years ago, I lost everything I thought defined me. My marriage, my home, the life I'd planned to build with someone who couldn't find the courage to stand beside me. Her voice carried steady conviction across the room. I used to think that loss was the worst thing that ever happened to me. She paused, finding Noah's face in the crowd, his small hand already raised in an enthusiastic wave that made her smile, despite the formality of the moment. I understand now it was the beginning of the only life I actually wanted. The room erupted into applause again, warmer this time, genuine in the specific way audiences respond when they recognize authenticity instead of rehearsed sentiment. Sofia's eyes swept across the crowd as she held the award, and near the back of the room, seated among ordinary guests rather than commanding a front-row seat as he once would have insisted upon, sat Dominic. Not as a billionaire CEO, not surrounded by the specific performative respect his old world had once demanded. Just another guest in the audience, watching, applauding. Their eyes met across the distance. He didn't look away, didn't perform discomfort or forced enthusiasm the way he might have once, 7 years ago, when appearing anywhere near Sofia in public would have detonated the careful image he'd spent his life protecting. He simply applauded, steadily, genuinely, the specific unguarded pride of a man, finally, publicly, unmistakably proud of a woman he'd once kept hidden behind mansion walls and practiced deflections in magazine interviews. Sofia held his gaze for a moment longer than necessary, not with anger. Not with the specific ache of unfinished business either, something steadier than both, the quiet acknowledgement of two people who had once destroyed something irreplaceable and had spent a year rebuilding what could actually be salvaged from the wreckage. He'd kept every promise since that afternoon at the park, Noah's school events, the clumsy first attempts at baking cookies that left flour across Dominic's expensive shirts while Noah laughed uncontrollably. Weekend visits that started stilted and awkward, and slowly, month by month, became something that looked increasingly like an actual relationship between father and son. Sofia had watched it happen with the specific, careful vigilance of a mother protecting her child's heart, ready to close the door the moment Dominic's commitment wavered. It never had, not once, across an entire year of second chances Dominic had earned through consistency, rather than grand gestures. But watching him applaud from the audience now, no expectation in his expression, no lingering hope that tonight might be the night she reconsidered everything, Sofia understood something she hadn't fully accepted until this exact moment. He wasn't performing pride for an audience anymore. He simply felt it. She descended from the stage to find Noah breaking free from Eleanor's gentle hold, running toward her the way he always did after every important moment in her life, his small arms wrapping around her waist with the specific unrestrained joy only children carried so effortlessly. "You did it, Mom." His voice carried genuine excitement. "I told everyone that's my mom up there." Sofia laughed, kneeling to hug him properly, the golden trophy still clutched in one hand. "You told everyone, even the man next to me. He didn't even know your name, and I told him everything." Eleanor's soft laugh carried across the small distance between them. "That sounds exactly like something you'd do." Across the room, Dominic approached slowly, stopping a respectful distance away, his hands in his pockets, the specific, careful body language of a man who had learned, finally, permanently, the difference between presence and intrusion. "Congratulations." His voice carried none of the performative charm that had once defined every public appearance he'd ever made. "You earned every bit of that." Sofia studied him for a moment. "Thank you for coming. I wouldn't have missed it." He looked down at Noah, who was already tugging at his sleeve with the specific excited energy of a 7-year-old, eager to share every detail of the evening. "Dad, did you see? She won. She actually won." "I saw." Dominic's smile carried genuine warmth, the specific unguarded expression that had taken him nearly a year to fully rebuild after decades of controlled distance. I saw everything. Sofia watched the exchange between father and son with something settling quietly in her chest. Not romantic longing, not unresolved grief, simply the specific peace of watching something broken get rebuilt into exactly the shape it needed to become, even if that shape looked nothing like the marriage she'd once hoped for. Eleanor's hand found her shoulder gently. "You did good, Sofia. All of it." Sofia's eyes carried genuine gratitude as she looked at the woman who had changed the entire trajectory of her life, with nothing more than a hospital room conversation and a business card 7 years earlier. "I had help. You had courage." Eleanor's voice carried quiet certainty. The help just showed up because of it. The evening continued around them. Photographers, congratulations from other executives, the specific whirlwind of recognition Sofia had spent 7 years earning through work, rather than inheritance or convenient marriage. But the moment that mattered most had already happened. Dominic Moretti, sitting among ordinary guests instead of commanding a room the way he once demanded, applauding a woman he'd once been too ashamed to acknowledge publicly, no longer hiding her, no longer choosing anyone's opinion over her worth, simply, finally, proudly, watching her become exactly who she'd always been capable of becoming. 7 years too late for the marriage, exactly in time for their son. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you that real worth was never something anyone else's shame could define, subscribe right now, because we are not finished. Share this with someone who needs a story about earned redemption today. Like this video, drop your city below.